The issue is being hijacked by people either who know or maybe are ignorant, but I think they know. The issue is being hijacked. And people like you and me are being told we're going to have to, in future generations, pay back through increases in taxes these deficits. But the truth is, the reality is, every time, deficits, as the deficit grows larger, in an accounting sense, as the deficit grows larger, all that relates to is more government spending that can be used on things like Social Security. And if we figure out a way to balance out to take the power of the creation of money away from private institutions, which creates fabulous wealth for a few individuals and debt slavery for millions of people, if we took the power to create money away from private institutions and put it firmly in the hands of government, then what would happen is we would have a system in which everything by definition that needed to be fully funded would be fully funded. And all that money would be something that was used in a very pure sense. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my God, how can you say that? Government is so corrupt. You're partially right. But what you would have there in a very pure sense is money being used for what it should be used for, which is the exchange of goods and the creation of services so that nobody finds themselves in a position of debt servitude over the course of their lifetime, trying to pay for things that they don't need and unable to get the services that they do need. So my argument when I read things like this is that people don't understand modern money. They don't understand that the federal government at any time, with its relationship to the Federal Reserve, can create as much liquidity as it needs to create. Yes, there are going to be consequences to that, but the reason there are consequences is because money is privatized. You have the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates of the world who, between them, have a GDP larger than 95% of the nations of the world. Between Zuckerberg, Gates, and that's $100 billion of value, of worth. That's larger than the gross domestic product of the majority of nations of the world. But because you have money created by banks, private institutions, you have this extraordinary wealth accumulation by a very small amount of people. You have private debt for millions and millions of people, and then you have folks predominantly on the right, the political right, predominantly. I'm not saying that this is not an ideological issue necessarily, but predominantly on the right, who make the argument that it's because of government waste and it's because of government mismanagement that we have these terrible debt problems. And this is simply not true. The reason we have this horrible situation with our unemployment and the reason we have movements toward austerity, which is creating cuts for Social Security and cuts for benefits, and seniors in Arizona who can't get root canals and having their teeth pulled, the reason that's happening is because the money that's being created by the Federal Reserve is being gobbled up by very few people. Very few people are gaining access to these billions and billions of dollars. And if the money were created by the government itself and the government were in charge of funding those things that needed to be funded, there would be no seniors in Arizona who needed to have their teeth pulled instead of being able to spend whatever needed to be spent on a root canal. So Mr. Peterson is wrong. Mr. Peterson is wrong. He is wrong to assert that you would have to reduce Social Security benefits to make up the deficit. It's simply erroneous. The reality is you don't have to reduce those benefits. The government can fully fund social services, but the government has to do another thing too, and that is take the power of the creation of money away from private institutions and have the guts to do it themselves. Now here's the problem. Ain't gonna happen. Because look at who runs the government. And now you're going to say, oh, he's a conspiracy guy. He's one of those guys who is all about, and behind closed doors and they have cloaks and daggers. And no, let's just go through, who are the people who hold the highest offices in our government? Who's the Secretary of the Treasury? Bueller? Tim Geithner. Dartmouth grad. Tim Geithner. Oh, didn't he work at Goldman Sachs? Yes, of course he did. Who was one of Barack Obama's most powerful economic advisors? Wasn't it Robert Rubin? Wasn't he a Goldman Sachs guy? Oh, yeah. Now you're going to say, oh, he's anti-Goldman Sachs. No. Just pointing out the fact that when you have the people who run the banks also running the government, you're never going to take that power away from the banks. And now you're going to say, or I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to say, oh my God, what a hypocrite Weintraub is. Even, you may just be changing the channel. You know, what an egomaniac and a babbling egomaniac Weintraub is, but whatever, right? I would say, and I am not an investment counselor, here is my disclaimer. If you invest based upon my investment advice, then you are an idiot and you deserve to lose all of your money. So I'm not an investment counselor. Please invest your small amounts of money at your own risk. I would buy as many shares of Bank of America right now as I possibly could. If I were a man of means, which I am not, I would buy as many shares of Bank of America as I could. And here's why. If Bank of America fails, the entire economic system that runs our nation goes down the tubes. If Bank of America goes bankrupt, the entire economic system that exists now, money created as debt and as loans to be repaid, goes right down the tubes. There is no way that any government run by whomever, it could be Barack Obama and the Democrats, could be whatever Republican maybe gets elected, that's going to be a knee slapper, right? The next Republican who comes to office, the next Republican who comes to office is going to be scary. But anyway, it could be Obama, it could be Newt Gingrich, none of these people. It could even be, what's her name there from Minnesota, Bachmann, Michelle Bachmann, there's a scary lady. Michelle Bachmann who comes to power, none of them would let these institutions fail. Because if these institutions fail, that would be the end of our economic way of, that would be the end of us. That would be it. It would be it. Right, done. When you have a monetary system based upon an economic growth, right? You know, we talk about this thing called economic growth. Like the GDP, the gross domestic product, was revised upward to 1.3% this year. We're going to grow by 1.3%. Well, how does that growth take place? Well, the Federal Reserve monetizes debt, and that money is used by institutions like Bank of America and Goldman Sachs and Citibank and all of these institutions. That money is used and gets into the system and is invested and is used to pump up the markets and is used to pump up the price of commodities. And so if that fails, if the measures, if the Bank of America collapses, that system collapses. If Bank of America goes bankrupt, why do you think Henry Paulson rammed a $750 billion bailout package through the Congress back in 2008 after Lehman failed? Because when Lehman failed, they went, holy beep! If we let this happen to another institution, we could watch the American way dissolve in front of our very eyes. And why do you think that the government, in cahoots with the Federal Reserve, together, spent upwards of $1 trillion to support AIG? Because AIG, I guess, had written all these really bogus credit default swap contracts backing up debts or investments that Goldman's and other investment firms had. Because if AIG hit the skids and all of these swaps contracts and derivative contracts went bad, that would be it. The stock market, you see how the other day it was in the 10s? It would be in the 2s. The S&P would be, remember how it was at 666 back in, 666 points back in or late 2008? Or early 2009? The S&P would be, at 245 points. The economy would, and the only reason that we wouldn't be experiencing what we experienced in the 1930s would be if the government was still pounding out the money to pay for unemployment insurance and SNAP, which is the new euphemism for food stamps. It's Supplemental Nutrition Something Program. which, by the way, I support, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, if you understand that there's no way that the government will ever let these banks fail, ever. They cannot do it. If you understand that. And if you understand that there are going to be trillions upon trillions of dollars, either indirectly or directly, pumped into the economy through the Federal Reserve over the next several years, over the next 5 to 10 years, then you understand that Bank of America is eventually going to be able to claim great profitability. And do I think that's good? No, I think it's corrupt, bad, horrible. There are going to be trillionaires, right? Jamie Dimon, these guys who run these large institutions, we're going to have our first trillionaire. We're going to have states, the state of Delaware is going to be owned by some guy who's a trillionaire. He's going to rename the state, right? He's going to call it Zuckerbergville. But you're also going to have, of course, extraordinary poverty on the part of the majority of people. Anyway, there's no way that the government is going to let these institutions fail. They can't. So what's the alternative? To continue to pump trillions of dollars of liquidity into the economy. Those monies don't make it down to people like me. I watch the price of a bag of rice go from $4 a bag to $5 a bag to $6 a bag. My income doesn't go up. In real terms, my income goes down. I might, make my 35, 40, 30, whatever $1,000 a year, somewhere, right in that range. That's probably about my income, somewhere between, 30 and 40 grand a year when all is said and done. That money, of course, is worth less and less and less as the price of things goes up and up and up. So as these monies get pumped into the economy by these private institutions known as banks that do this by virtue of people borrowing money and having to repay those monies with interest, as these monies get pumped into the economy, there is going to be the illusion of profitability for very few people, and there's going to be the ability to pump up the stock markets, and the stocks of companies like Bank of America is going to go up. Right now it's at about $6.30 a share. I bet you it's going to go down in the next maybe 6 to 12 months. I bet you it's going to go down to $4 to $5 a share, maybe high 4s, low 5s. I bet you in 10 years, Bank of America stock is going to be at between $60 and $75 a share. Coffee. And the reason I say that is because no political leader, no leadership, no Congress is going to allow those institutions to fail because they are going to be told in no uncertain terms by the economic wizards behind the scenes that if they do that, you might as well kiss the United States as we know it goodbye. Unfortunately, the more and more money that's created by these private institutions, banks, and the Federal Reserve, that gets captured by a very small amount of people, the more you're going to have this growing disparity between the haves and have-nots. So it's kind of that double-edged sword, damned if you do and damned if you don't. So there's no way the government's going to let these institutions fail. Not going to happen. And that's why we're in debt, and debt is bad. No. The reason that we're in this terrible situation is because the money that's created, the liquidity that's created in that relationship between the federal government and the private banks, all that money goes to Warren Buffett. I almost said Jimmy Buffett. Wasted away again. Sorry. All of that money goes to Warren Buffett and the Warren Buffetts of the world. It doesn't come to me. And so these major investors, these multimillionaires and billionaires, as the government creates another $1 trillion in liquidity, they get that stuff. The banks funnel the money to them, indirectly and directly. And you and me, we end up just paying more at the gas pump. And we end up paying more at the grocery store. And our real wealth goes down. Our income stays the same and our real wealth goes down. And the solution is this. The government needs to take over production of money. Not production's not the right word. The government needs to be in charge of the creation of money. The financial industry is bad. The financial industry is bad. Let's just say it. The financial industry, when you have people who are making hundreds of millions of dollars and down the street from them are people living under underpasses. That is bad. And there are a lot of people. There was someone on the other day on the radio, some right-wing Republican guy talking about Barack Obama, one of his plans, and the guy, congressman, I can't remember which congressman, he said, "We don't want to turn this into class warfare." It is class struggle. I mean, why do we dance around that issue as if it's somehow such a bad thing to talk about? That's what it is. I won't use the word class warfare because it isn't warfare right now. In the United States, it's not warfare, but it's class struggle. There is an increasing disparity between social classes, and the reason that that disparity exists is because private institutions known as banks create money based upon debt, based upon a borrower's promise to repay. And for you and me, who are in the middle class and the working class, that debt is impossible to repay. And the cost of living goes up and up and up, and our income stays the same. And for the Warren Buffetts, what the hell do they care? It could be $600 a gallon for a gallon of gas. What the heck does he care? If it costs him $45,000 to fill up the tank on his Humvee, he doesn't care. $45,000 is nothing. For you and me, $3.50 a gallon for gas is untenable. $5 for a bag of brown rice at the grocery store is untenable. I can't afford $145 to go to the co-op, the Dartmouth co-op, to put healthy food in my house. I can't afford that. It's nuts. And people would say, well, the reason that's happening, and this comes back to the red herring being put forward by the conservative side of the political aisle, the reason that that is happening, they would say, is because of government spending. And that's a big old lie. That's a big lie, that government spending is creating the inflation that's driving the middle class into poverty. If you are a member of the working class or the middle class and you are a Republican, what the heck are you thinking? What are you thinking? If you are poor, or if you are part of the working poor, or if you are part of the middle class and you believe in the Tea Party's message of cutting and austerity, what are you thinking? That is absolutely self-hating, self-loathing. It is nuts. Understand that the government can fund everything it needs to. It can fund Social Security, it can fund health care, because the government, in a fiat currency system, has no operational limits to the amount of money it creates. The problem isn't the creation of money. The problem is who controls it. Now, there are a lot of people out there like, Ron Paul. We got to go back to the gold standard. We got to make sure that we're not spending beyond our means. What does that mean? Spending beyond our means. What does that mean? Does it mean that we have to go back to the days when we were all plowing the fields and we were a productive-based society and it was all production and we had all these factories? And well, that's not going to happen. There was a story on NPR this morning about solar panels being created in China. Did you hear the story on NPR? Good. So the solar panels are created in China by workers who get paid, a pittance. And the solar panels get sold back. I mean, it's cheap. The amount that it costs these companies to create these panels in China is minuscule in relationship to what it would cost. And of course,